Brothers Ernest and Cecil Eve, who owned an automobile franchise, and some of their associates developed Victoria's Lansdowne field in 1927. It opened in 1928, home to British Columbia Airways Ltd. The original runway, little more than well-worn tracks in the grass. The Eves had leased 77 acres from the original owner, Elizabeth Scott, and opened their aerodrome. The original lease was for 5 years at $650 a year. During the next 4 years, they had many triumphs and a business-crushing crash. In July 1927, Ernie Eve went to Cleveland and Detroit on automotive business and to explore aviation opportunities. Ernie talked with both Edsel and Henry Ford. They said Ford was building a large all-metal Ford-Stout Tri-Motor aircraft based on Anthony Fokker's 3-engine passenger aircraft. While Ernie was returning home, Cecil announced the purchase of 2 land-based aircraft. There was no longer talk of float planes. They hired 2 First World War veterans, pilot Haliburton or Hal Wilson, and mechanic Ted Cressey. In August, the Eves had a meeting that led to the creation of the short-lived Victoria Aero Club. It lasted 6 months, but was replaced by another. In November, the first aircraft arrived, a Driggs Dart 2-seat biplane. Wilson and Cressey set to work making the new hangar-ready and the biplane airworthy. By the end of 1927, the field was licensed as a landing field, and on January 1, 1928, was licensed as a commercial airport. Opening ceremonies were held January 28th. The Ford Tri-Motor arrived in July and flew a group of Victoria people to Seattle for the opening of Boeing Field. For 26 days in 1928, between July 30th and August 24th, British Columbia Airways flew its Ford Tri-Motor Model 4 ATB passenger aircraft. It carried 1,292 passengers on some 150 scheduled flights. 25% of these flights were between Victoria and Seattle. The Ford Tri-Motor was the largest, most modern commercial airliner in the world. This all-metal monoplane was powered by 3 220-horsepower Wright JS engines. The aircraft was 49 feet long and 13 feet high, with a wingspan of 77 feet. It could accommodate 2 pilots. The Victoria model with folding seats could carry 14 passengers. On August 24, 1928, on a flight from Victoria to Seattle, the Tri-Motor crashed. It had been seen struggling in fog half an hour after takeoff, as reported by the Dungeness Lighthouse. No one survived the crash. 6 men, 1 woman, and 1 fox terrier. The accident was international news, and at the time, the worst catastrophe in the history of commercial aviation in America. British Columbia Airways was cleared from blame in a Department of National Defense inquiry. However, the inquiry recommended only seaplanes and amphibians be used for passenger flight between Victoria and the mainland. It was 15 years before that changed. Early in February 1928, a new Victoria Aero Club had been formed, taking advantage of government programs that provided de Havilland Moth biplanes to be used for teaching and training. Before long, There were over 100 members, with 42 wanting flying lessons. The crash of the Ford Tri-Motor did not seem to affect the club. However, the club crashed its moth in March 1929. Due to the Ford Tri-Motor crash and other problems, British Columbia Airways Ltd. asked the city to take over the lease in October 1929. From 1927 to 29, Lansdowne Field had been a private enterprise, as initiated by the Eve brothers. From 1930 to 33, it was managed by the City of Victoria, even though it was in Saanich. In September 1930, a notice was put on the field saying, "Commercial flying is prohibited, and the field is for emergency landing purposes only." Here are some of the highlights of the field's remarkable history. Starting in 1928, Lansdowne Field became known as a reliable airfield, drawing aircraft from the western United States. In July 1928, John Henry Mears and Charles Collier arrived in Victoria aboard the Canadian Pacific Empress of Russia, along with their aircraft, the City of New York. The aircraft was a single-engine Fairchild with folding mono wings. It was towed from William Head to Lansdowne Field, where it was made ready for its final leg to New York. At 3:30 a.m., it left for New York to complete an around-the-world flight record of 23 days, 15 hours, and 21 minutes. By 1931, the field was in decline, but in May it hosted an air show with 2 local aircraft and 6 from Vancouver. In October 1931, Charles Lindbergh and his wife arrived pre-dawn and took off on a flight path to the eastern United States. In June 1931, the ratepayers of Victoria had voted not to put tax money into funding a municipal airport. When the ratepayers said no, the City of Victoria got a release of liability from Mrs. Scott, who gave control back to the Eve brothers. In early 1931, a final attempt to restart British Columbia Airways failed, marking its end. From autumn 1928 until summer 1929, Wilson and Cressey kept the flying school going, but there were still financial problems from the crash. Both Alexander Eagle Rock biplanes were sold to Vancouver's Aero Club of BC. Wilson joined them in July. Cressey left to work for Alaska Washington Airways, and British Columbia Airways existed only on paper. Also in 1931, a proposal for another airfield emerged. Gordon Head Airfield was located at what today is the University of Victoria. Although the ratepayers would not fund either airfield, they both operated successfully for 2 more years.